Welcome back to the Dopesick Show. You won't get sick of. I'm Spencer. This is Sasha. Spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but have been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. Also got quite a few stories about the wild stuff that actually happened when I was in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison, you want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So this is a story of somebody getting a little taste of what they deserve. Not retribution, as I'd see fit. I'd seen, I'm pretty sure everybody would agree. They wish a whole lot more could get done, but this was pretty good. So it's an awful thing that happened, but the ending was a little bit satisfying. So at around 3 o'clock, a mom lets her fourth grade daughter walk 2 blocks to the dollar store to pick up, a handful of items, toilet paper being among them, just run an errand, just allowing her to walk back and forth. Sometimes kids like walking a block or two away from the house. She's in 4th grade, about that age to where 2 blocks from a house in a small town, and there hadn't been a murder in this town in over 25 years. So, everybody knows each other. It's not that type of a place. That's what people think anyway. So, the girl doesn't show back up. About 4:30, hour and a half later, they start to get worried. They go have people searching everybody, and there's one witness that saw the girl get into a Ford F-150, and they end up interviewing a guy who matches the description, and ask him to do a lie detector test. And he willingly does a lie detector test, which somebody willing to do a lie detector test, that's usually a pretty decent sign. Usually, if they say no, that's usually a pretty bad sign. Usually, guilty people won't take a lie detector test, but some of them think they can beat it. But anyway, his results turned up inconclusive. So he was main suspect in this. Now, about 5 days later, they found this little 4th grade girl's body in a creek. There was a guy that came forward, a second person, not the original suspect, who was in his early 20s, and he confessed, said that he took this little girl's life. He said that she had wandered through the woods upon what was a meth lab, and that to keep her quiet, that's what he did. That he tried to scare her at first, but that's the route that he ended up taking. So they think, okay, well, that first guy, yeah, he didn't do it. He was willing to take a lie detector test. He didn't fail it, didn't pass it, but he didn't fail it. So it's got to be this guy. Why would somebody come forward and lie about something like that? Now, the autopsy report came back, and the little girl had been assaulted. Yeah, like that. That does not match his story. So either they're 2 separate crimes that horrible happen in the same day, or this guy's falsely confessing to this. So they gather a good bit of evidence. DNA evidence, in particular a cigarette butt, links them back to their first suspect, the person who had the inconclusive lie detector test. So they released the first guy. Basically, they knew he was just making it up. There are certain people that do things, we'll never know why certain people do the things they do. Attention, parents didn't give them enough attention when they were little, something like that. I can't see why anybody do something so stupid. So this guy is the suspect for this. Now, during the trial, his wife was very supportive at first, but the mounds of evidence and certain things, looking back in retrospect, she changed her opinion. She asked him why he did it when he was walking into the court, being led into the court in handcuffs. Just obviously, imagine the person you're with, you find out they done something unspeakable like that. And also, there is a bit of denial when you're friends with somebody to such an extent that they could be capable of something like that. I had something similar to that happen. Martial arts gym that I trained at when I was on bond. I trained there 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. When I was in prison, I heard that there was this girl that was in there. Now, this is a separate story. I'm going to divert a little bit, but just in defense of the guy's wife, because she did end up changing her stance on this. This girl was 14 years old when I started training there. She looked like she was in her mid-20s. Guys would hit on her, and the teacher would let guys know, you might chill out, man. She's just 14. Apparently, from the time she was 14 to the time she was 16, the martial arts teacher was doing stuff he shouldn't have done. At first, that was hard for me to believe because it did seem like she had this crush on him. And she did, because apparently stuff was happening behind the scenes. Now, what ended up happening with that was she didn't come forward and say anything. It was actually the martial arts teacher's girlfriend who suspected it, because her mom would allow him to pick her up, drive her back and forth, go to his house alone. There were weird stuff that happened. So the martial arts teacher's girlfriend got on Facebook and pretended to be him and talk like he was him about stuff they'd done in the past, and the girl responded back. And that's how it got brought out and brought to attention. Basically once certain things came out, obviously, at first I was like, well, she did have some problems and this and that. But then, once you hear more that comes out, at first when you're that close of friends with somebody who seems like they're such a good person, you can't believe it. There's this denial phase. But then when you look back in retrospect, you can accept what it is and say, oh my. So with that, he ended up getting 6 months. 6 months for 2 years of indecent liberties with this child. But anyway, back to this story. The woman said the same night the girl went missing that he sat the family down and had them had a family dinner. He didn't normally eat family dinners. He normally ate in front of the TV and said he wanted to enjoy the time while he still could. It was odd. And then he started saying he knew they were going to pin the disappearance of this little girl on him. And he kept driving by the place that her body was found. Odd things. The wife ended up realizing, oh my Lord, this is what's happening. So anyway, this guy said some pretty foul stuff. He said, basically, one of the things he said was that he couldn't believe that the parents would allow their daughter to walk 2 blocks alone. That's just so infuriating. He says, I have a 14-year-old son. I wouldn't let him walk 2 blocks without me. Blaming the parents for letting the daughter walk 2 blocks to a store in a small town in which everybody's friendly and everybody knows each other. It's the type of town people can pick up a hitchhiker in because there's not that type of worry for stuff. And he also said that sobering up, he was intoxicated, and when he was sobering up, he remembered seeing the guy who admitted to it, but they cleared him of not doing it, getting out of the truck, and he couldn't remember, and this and that. He ended up taking multiple, life plus like 30 years. So then he could avoid the death penalty. Now, he was put in prison. Now, this is a really infuriating thing, okay? Small town especially. Like, in a small town that hasn't had a murder in over 25 years, for the first murder in 25 years to be that of a little 4th grade girl that was walking to a dollar store 2 blocks from her house. People were mad. People do not like these type of people in prison, okay? Especially this. This is particularly vicious, the details of what he did. And he ended up in prison in a certain wing with the girl's cousin. The girl's cousin was a younger fellow. This guy's he was 39 years old at this time, and the girl's cousin was in his early 20s. The girl's cousin, from the looks of him, looked like he had a little bit of a build to him. And he threatened this guy multiple times, threatened him multiple times when he was in that wing. Imagine ending up in the same wing as somebody that took the life of somebody that you love. It's infuriating, okay? So, this guy who did this has his own cell, they're not putting him in a cell with somebody else. He comes back from eating, from chow, I believe it was. It might have been a little later than that. Actually, I believe it happened at 4 p.m. It happened at 4 p.m., so it had to have been a little later on than that. So at 4 p.m. is when this happened, but he walks back into his room, and he's got the cousin and another person who's supposed to be a distant relative waiting. He doesn't know they're in his room. They shut the door. The door automatically locks. Certain doors lock like that. In the regional jail I was in, if you shut it, it locked. You had to have the guard pop it. In a federal prison, it was actually a turnkey type deal. They actually had to turn the key. It was not electronic. But anyway, they rough him up. He's begging them this, and that. And they basically give him a choice. They ultimately tell him, and they had shanks on him too. And now something else to note. The guy, the killer I mentioned, he was caught months before with a toothbrush that he'd made into a shank and stuff like that. He was pretty much suspecting something bad was going to happen to him. Didn't have it ready at this point though, and these guys were ready. These guys, it wouldn't matter if they did. He could have cut them. They were getting him. They end up roughing him up, and they put a shank to him, and they ultimately tell him, listen, We can either poke you full of holes, or you can accept this tattoo. If you accept this tattoo, we won't do anything else to you. We'll leave you alone. That'll be it. As far as we're concerned, we will be even. That will be the end of it. He accepts that offer. The victim, in which I'm not going to name, but the child, the 4th grade girl, how to respect family and everybody else, he tattoos her name, huge, across the guy's forehead, with revenge right underneath of it. This guy has a giant tattoo across his forehead. Of course, staff sees that. They pull the guy out and everything else, and the pictures end up on the internet, end up on bloggers and all kinds of other people's stuff too. And ultimately, the fella, the cousin, he got charged for doing it, of course. The 2 guards that were working the unit, they got fired because they said that they were the ones who took the pictures to send it to people who put it on social media and everything else, who got the pictures out there. Personally, I think they should have got a raise. I think that guy should have got a raise too. Both of them. I think one guy should have got let out of prison. I think he did a public service. When you can see evil and spot evil like that, when you got something like that written on it, it's a sign. This guy is evil. This guy deserves ridicule. This guy deserves it. So, this was something a lot of people loved. This was something a lot of people really thought was a small little piece of justice, because anywhere he goes in a prison system, you see that tattooed on his, you're wondering, you pretty much know. So he's a marked guy. So ultimately, what ends up happening with this particular person is he is in pretty much 23 and 1 lockdown, and the little bit of rec time he does get, the hour or however long they give him, is spent by himself. He lives in a single cell in solitary. And to live like that's not a fun place to live. And spent some time in solitary myself. It's not a fun place to live. But not only to live in solitary, but you can best bet that anybody on the block, anywhere on the range, anybody that can say anything loud enough for his ears to hear, they are calling him every type of you know what, and saying what they'll do to him if they can get to him. And any chance, should the guards mess up, should there be something, or should you have a guard that might, pass the key out. That's happened actually in the past year. There's actually some awful, unspeakable stuff that happened in another jail related to that. It's actually on one of the ones that was 60 days in. They sold the key to an inmate. Assaults have, it was terrible. But anyway, if there's ever a chance for people to get to him, anything, people will want to get to him. This is, there's certain people you get points for and you don't get points for. This is one you get points for, okay? This is one that if anybody could get to him, they would want to get to him and do whatever they could to him. So anyway, this was a little bit different from my typical. This was not a story related to my time in prison or somebody that I knew. I actually talked to my friend Kevin Crockett yesterday, KC, the one who makes the leather work that's pretty incredible. We were talking about that, and he was telling me about this guy we call Birdman. If you know who Prodigy is, it's a band, and guy's got like a bald head, but he's got like these 2 things that, go back of red hair. Guy had the Prodigy haircut, bunch of face. He was a crazy dude. It's on the worst at prison tattoos ever. Some website with worst prison tattoos ever. And he's telling me about it. So I went on there to look. And I came across this story. And, I read it. And it was one that I thought was good enough that I figured I'd share on here, because everybody likes a little revenge story. Especially when it comes to something that happens to a child that's awful, it's unspeakable. People like a story of revenge. They like to see somebody get something they deserve when they do something awful to somebody that's that helpless. They said this little girl walked around with a smile on her face all the time. You'd never see her not smiling. And she walked 2 blocks. And the guy had the nerve to say she shouldn't be allowed to have walked by herself, being in 4th grade 2 blocks. And, what? Not the right thing to say. So anyway, this is a little bit off from what I typically do, but it was a story that I found was interesting, and I figured I'd share with you because it was one that, has it can't fix, it can't do anything, but this person at least is marked. And that's just my opinion on it. I'm sure plenty of people agree with me, and there's some, yuppie-duppy people that disagree with me, all humans have rights and this and that. Yeah, well, when you mess with kids, I think that you don't get that anymore. I mean, you can think different, man. I really don't care. But in this case, a little bit of something happened. So anyway, if you liked the video, press the like button. Let me know what you thought about it. This was one I figured was pretty interesting and I'd share with you guys. Y'all have a good one.